Now, unfortunately, Markus Luczak-Roesch, our chair in complexity science, is unwell today, and so he's unable to be with us. So that gives a little more time to the speakers that we do have, who I'm really happy to welcome. First of all, Helmut Modlik, who's the CEO, Tumu Whakarae, of Te Runanga o Tō Rangatira. And it's great to have you here, Helmut. We were just saying that he also was a guest speaker in Dan's class earlier in the year, so we're borrowing a lot of your time, Helmut, and your wisdom today. Helmut has a lot of experience in executive leadership before moving to the Runanga, and I'm sure has a lot of wisdom to share with us. And he's been up very early this morning, opening a new building for the Wellington City Mission.
Awesome.
Which is great. And Murray Edridge, those of you that were here last time, was one of our guest speakers from the Wellington City Mission. And also this morning, on the topic of wisdom or heading to a wiser future, we have two wonderful young women from Wellington Girls College. Teresa, who's the head of Student Learning Committee at Wellington Girls, and who, along with Millie Aislabie, they both led the student response to the unforeseen property risks at Wellington Girls College earlier this year. I think that might have involved a protest at Parliament. And they are very active, you can see from their blazers, lots of badges, and we really look forward to hearing from you about getting to a wiser future. So you'll recall that we had the first session in this series was how to get to a healthier future for all. The second was how to get to a wealthier future for all. And today is how to get to a wiser future for all. And I think we've got a great panel to kick us off in that sort of discussion. I was very keen to have younger people on the panel. That's why I got Helmut as well.
Comedian.
As well as Millie and Teresa. And as I've said at each of these sessions, I believe a key public role of universities and of faculties like ours that combine both business and government is to create opportunities to examine issues from different perspectives. And we've had a blend of academic and external speakers, many of whom have been alumni of this university, to discuss these topics. So I look forward to this morning. We're going to follow the usual process that we have had, where there are two sets of questions that I've posed our speakers. And I will give each of them, well, originally it was 8 minutes, but given Markus isn't here, we can stretch it to 10, to talk about the first question, which is, in your opinion, what does a wiser future for all look like? And what are the 2 or 3 key challenges to achieving it? So we'll get each of them to speak on that. And then the second question is, what is essential to address those challenges? And we'll get each of them to speak on that for around 5 minutes, and then we'll open it up for discussion. So with not much further ado, I will turn the microphones on, because last time I forgot to turn them on. And we'll start with Helmut. What does a wiser future for all look like, and what are the 2 or 3 challenges to achieving it?
In 10 minutes.
Yeah.
Right. That's like best sort of world peace in 15. So to begin, can I ask if there are any professional philosophers in the room? Anyone who studied philosophy? All right, so I can exaggerate and no one will know the difference. But it's good to be with you. So I'm going to, I guess, make some philosophical observations to kick off with, because it's hard to talk about wisdom without grounding yourself in something. All of us think we see the world as it is, but in fact that's in some sense not possible. truth is that we all see the world as we are. There's no alternative. The world doesn't speak for itself. We have to perceive it, with our senses and our cognition. And that inevitably means that, the frames, the lenses, the paradigms that are in our head that come to us through our upbringing, socialisation, in a very real sense, dictate the reality in the world that we perceive. These are not new observations, but they're relevant to some effects I'm going to share. I was intrigued with the frame that I got, if my memory serves me right, and my email will ensure I do. The theme was getting a fairer future for all, healthy, wealthy and wise. And I was immediately struck by the order of that. A fairer future, healthy, wealthy and wise. Why I was struck by that was, wisdom like rationality, it is not value free. Both actually necessarily require a grounding or foundation of our priori preferences, of values. Culture to a group of people is what personality is to individuals. Both the components of both are values, the preferred states of being or acting that actually determine what's good and not good. And so, when we say something like getting to a fairer future that's healthy, wealthy and wise, my mind immediately jumped in, wouldn't it make more sense to say something like getting to a wiser future that was healthy, wealthy and fair? So that's the first twist that I'd like to throw on it and make some connection between those words as it occurs to me anyway. Fear, when I thought about fear as being a primary objective for society that we would want to pursue, reflection for me was what does fairness mean? To me, it's got to be grounded in some sense of the equal value or worth of human beings. Hard to talk about fairness if you don't begin with that premise, in my mind. That people haven't always thought that way, and many people still don't. Devaluing other human beings because of race, because of gender. Heaven forbid being a coloured woman who's LGBTQ. You're at the bottom of the pile, in some people's minds. But if we reject that premise that people in fact are fundamentally of equal value, and I think there's logic and evidence for taking that position, as well as it just being good to my mind. If we start with the premise that people are of equal value and worth, then to my mind what flows out of that, if we're trying to pursue fairness, is the idea that our preferences are equivalent. What we want for ourselves as we pursue happiness, which I think is fair to say is the object of all conscious life. It's not rational to want to be miserable. So we'll assume that we're all trying to be happy in some sense, and that our choices and the opportunity and the freedom to pursue that is got something to do with fairness. So we're worth the same. It flows that our ability to have opportunity and choices to pursue as we perceive our happiness to derive is got something to do with what a fair society, what it looks like. So that then leads me then to the other words that were in the theme, health and wealth. Well, see, immediately my mind went, fairness when it comes to health and the freedom to choose. See, an interesting thing is that for me, well-being, which is a bigger concept than health, is a multifactorial thing. The human condition is a multifactorial thing, right? We aren't just organic machines, even though our doctors treat us like that. That our physical, psychological, emotional, spiritual, and even wider dimensions are all in play when we're talking about well-being. And that at the heart of that, though, are choices. So the well-being, our well-being and health is highly correlated with having more resources and therefore more choices. People who are better off tend to be more healthy. Why? It's because they typically, on average, have a greater understanding, education of what gives rise to being well. They have resources that give them a bit more options. Their homes are warmer, etc. A healthier future does mean that we have to, in my mind, respect the equivalence of human beings, enable some sense of equivalence of opportunity, of choice, but not outcome. See, it doesn't follow for me that pursuing equal outcomes makes sense. Because if I choose, I want to lose some weight, and I do, I haven't caught up from my COVID thing. But I really like ice cream, and it's my choice, how I balance out those two conflicting preferences, as we all do. So is it really right that somebody forces me? That does violence to the equivalence of our value and our freedom to choose. But then that gives rise to the consequences of our choices. And is it fair that you pay through your taxation for my poor choices? Yeah, that doesn't seem fair. So there are some complexities in us teasing out the boundaries of our fairness and our choices and consequences and the information that flows back to us as a consequence of what we choose. And the boundaries, it seems to me, of where our fairness ends is where unfairness begins for others. Now, I'm packing a lot in my 10 minutes, so you'll forgive me. But all of this has resource implications, which leads me to a wealthier future that somehow is fairer. What do I think about wealth? Well, all options that we may exercise, all choices we may make, will have resource implications. And on the fairness and equivalence frame, it does seem to me to be fair that we would organise ourselves so that opportunity for the development of the capability to have resources, to make choices, make sense. Wealth or surplus, arises out of the confluence of opportunity, capability, and resource. Think about that. I used to have a little sign over my desk when I was a young budding entrepreneur. Opportunity plus capability plus resource equals anything you want. And that all three are required in order to create a surplus and therefore have greater wealth. But one of the issues again that gives rise to that is, while it's not a sum zero game, we haven't yet figured out how to align the interests of labour and capital. We have not figured that out. The best thing we've got is taxation, and everybody hates it. People who pay it hate it, and the people who get paid the distributive payments don't like being beggars either. So we haven't cracked that one. Another logical challenge for us in the world side of things is that it is a finite world, and the industrial revolution, post-industrial revolution has all been about growth, more. And I think the time has arrived for us to talk about enough. But we'll get there in a second. So, challenges, Am I chucking challenges on the table? Yeah, okay, cool. Real quick. Challenges. First, number one challenge is we need a civil society that is designed to optimally create the conditions for a, healthier, wealthier, and fairer society. Currently, we do not have such a civil society. I won't get into it unless you ask me, but the inherent flaws in the form of liberal democracy that we operate are glaring and have given rise to great inequality and challenges that are currently stretching our social fabric. So we made it up, so we can make up a better one, and I look forward to talking about what that might be. So that's one challenge. Second challenge, when it comes to our economy, is we're falling off a demographic cliff with the majority of the world. So in recent decades, for a range of reasons, we're not having children anymore. That means that our workforce is shrinking. That means that all of the premises that we've created around the growth-oriented society and economies are on shaky ground. What are we going to do about that? You can only import your labour for so long, and you end up in a global competition and race for those people. So aligning the interests of labour and capital, our core resource of people, big challenges. Last challenge I'll finish on, and I was talking to Jane about this before we came in. This is the doozer from my perspective. One of the reasons I was very glad that Teresa and Millie are here this morning is that we face a significant challenge moving forward on how to ensure the transmission of intergenerational wisdom. Think about that for a second. No one in the room has any idea what these young ladies think about much at all. Because their paradigms, their windows, their frames, their values are very different from us grey hair, no hairs, and the generations that have come since we've turned up. Our generations before had societal mechanisms for transmitting what I'll call wisdom intergenerationally. They are largely broken down, disappearing, and replaced with things that are resulting in isolated, fragmented, data-rich, wisdom-poor realities for so many people. So even if all of those who have gone before and are here yet, full of all the wisdom of the universe, and we aren't, of course, what is the mechanism for us transmitting that to the generations that have come? Now I'm keen to hear what you've got to say about that. So those are my opening bits, whānau, on what wisdom constitutes and fairness, and what's some of the big rock issues to challenge us moving forward. Kia ora.
Thank you very much, Noel. We'll move on to Millie and Teresa. Now you're going to do a joint act. I'm not sure how you want to organise it.
We're going to, we'll do this. Do a short introversion each. I think that's the easiest. Thank you very much. Is that, I feel like it's a bit loud, but that's okay. Kia ora everyone. To preface this, obviously this comes from a high school lens, so my facts and figures might not be there might not be many of them, but the opinions are definitely mine, and they come from a place of, well, I mean, if we think about wiseness, right, I think maybe because of my lived experience, wiseness to me is about education first and foremost, because I haven't yet experienced anything else, right, and I think that the formative years of a person's life are very, very important for building the skill set that you have going forward and the information that you go into higher education or go into the workforce with. And in order, I think, to build a wiser future, I would probably first say that you need to start at a grassroots level, at a very, very, very young age, so that children and teenagers learn I don't want to say the right things, but the right things for them, and learn a broad range of those things, and not just how to not just the quadratic formula, right? How to be compassionate, how to talk to others, how to deal with conflict, because I think that then from there, when you enter your adulthood and the rest of your life, it's much easier to create a society that is healthy, wealthy, and wise, and that is fair, because our values are ingrained in us from a very, very young age. I can say that for sure, because obviously prefrontal cortex still developing, but it's once it gets there, I don't think that my personality, I think that my personality will still very much be shaped, by who I was and what I was taught and who I was taught by. So in terms of getting to a wiser future, I think it probably looks like one where we have a very, very strong public education system. And our education system in New Zealand, it's fine, we're getting there, but it's it's, I think, really important that we look at education with a child's lens. I'm not really sure how to articulate this, but I think a lot of the time we expect to fix issues like a lack of wisdom or holistic education in society or literacy and numeracy rates, etc., with throwing money at the problem or reallocating funding from one place to another, and just kind of expecting that the easiest or the most obvious way to fix something will be the one that works. And I don't think that's true. So as the example that comes to mind, I'm sure a lot of you will have seen it on the news, the reallocation of the funding from Te Aotearoa Māori earlier this year, which was a professional development fund for teachers to learn everyday Māori to use in the classroom. And that funding was reallocated from professional development to the rest of the education sector. And one of the things that came about from it was new numeracy workbooks for primary schools, so for year, I think, 5 to 8. Numeracy workbooks are great, right? And I'm sure there are lots of kids that would benefit from that. But the problem that we have in this country with education, I don't think, is a lack of hard resources. I don't think it's that kids are not having enough worksheets in class or that their teachers aren't giving them the right times tables to learn. I think it is things like having a teacher that has knowledge of tikanga and that is going to instill important values in you from a young age and that has good access to professional development. So I think that when we reallocate funding in terms of education, in order to get to a wiser future, we have to think about what the stakeholders think rather than, I think, what the governing body thinks. Because if I'm totally honest, I think there's a little bit of a lack of stakeholder engagement in the education sector. I mean, we have, like 1 million kids in public schools, or slightly less than 1 million, and we very rarely get asked what we think. As Helmut was saying, I'm sure that you all have probably picked up some of my opinions by now, but it's, when we make decisions about education, they very often come from like yes, I am a parent, and my child, like if we talk about, as an example, maybe like a learning disability, right? Yeah, I have a child with ADHD, and I've seen how they act at home. Here are all the things I think about what's going to be best for them in terms of the development of the education sector. No one ever asked the kid, right? And I really do think that even in a non-traditional sense, if we had the Ministry of Education went into schools and literally sat down with a 5-year-old and just kind of got out some crayons, had a wee chat, and just asked children, what do you think of your classroom? What could be better? What parts of learning do you like and don't like? Because our teachers ask us that, and that's great, but our teachers don't always have the most freedom to do what they think is going to be best for kids. And I think many people would be surprised that even if you don't get the most eloquent or fact-checked answer from a child or a teenager, you will definitely get one that is enlightening and that will give you some really good data or evidence or opinions for policy changes that are made. And I think that's really important to take into consideration, not to kind of say, well, listen to young people, but listen to young people. Yeah, and I'm very lucky to have, obviously we're at a public school, but we're at a very well-resourced public school, high decile area. We're very lucky to be in a place where, I run the peer tutoring system at school, right? But I can only do that because kids have enough energy to come to school in the morning and have had breakfast and, can sort of, have those base resources and and to be able to be engaged with the education system. And then again, we have the idea that, to deal with truancy, you have to go into people's homes and tell them that they're doing something wrong, right? But there are very structural, systemic reasons that kids cannot learn in school, and so I think that's something else to think about, just to make sure that it's clear that while my lens is a public school student, I also think that there are many, many schools that, you know, I would not be able to be sitting here right now because kids don't have access to breakfast. You know, if the school lunch scheme has been drawn back, you know, like there's a lot of factors that I think the education system could be improved upon if we prioritized it a little bit more. Yeah, but
anyway. I wanted to speak a little bit more on youth representation and Make It 16. I mean, it's no secret, 16-year-olds and 17-year-olds, they have jobs, they pay taxes, they sometimes pay rent, sometimes they support their families themselves, they live in mouldy flats, things like that. Our country is also, it's one of the worst in the OECD for youth mental health. 16-year-olds, they can have a firearms license, things like this. I think it's incredibly important to consider 16-year-olds and 17-year-olds' voices at a systemic level because, believe it or not, we have something to say, and we're pretty good at saying it at times. There's so many issues and experiences that 16-year-olds deal with, but they have no control or voice to express their concerns with our current voting age. So just to speak on that quickly, Make It 16. But my main point of discussion that I wanted to talk about was I feel like we often use the word wisdom or wise in place of like intelligent or smart, and attack the word from a purely academic standpoint. But I looked up the definition of wise while I was prepping. Just more about having knowledge and being able to make judgment. That sort of led me to believe, led me to think about the arts and the power of arts for making change, but also creating a wiser future. Arts education, I believe, is incredibly important at all levels, at primary and secondary. I mean, arts education at a primary level, it's able to, studies show that in young children it really helps to build resilience, starting at a young age as well, it builds confidence. Arts education, I mean, you might not end up as an actor, but you end up as a person with the ability to speak in front of people, with good leadership skills and sort of public speaking abilities and things like that, which I think are incredibly important as we look to the future and we're building this generation of wise people. But so in July of this year, the coalition government, they defunded the Creatives in Schools program, which was a program started in 2020, designed to extend arts education in primary and secondary schools. Over its 3-year run, it helped over 350 schools. Our school was one of those. The program was really effective in getting children and teenagers back into the arts. So since 2003, the number of NCA students enrolled in arts such as music, dance, drama, and as curriculum subjects has decreased dramatically, almost halved, which is such a disappointment because what I was saying, the arts are so integral at creating a well-rounded individual, a person who's a good worker, someone who's employable, but not only that, but they enrich primary and high school life. But the Creative in Schools program, it was really effective, and I think sort of revitalizing the arts, especially at a secondary level. So for us, that looked like we were able to work with Mel Dodge, who she just finished a run at Circa doing prima facie. So the program helped fund schools to work with professional practitioners, professional actors, which are incredibly valuable experiences. We learned a lot. We did script writing. We were able to. It funded us going and performing in larger spaces, which, if you know anything about our school, we don't have a hall, so that was great. But so this whole program was defunded, which I believe to be incredibly unfortunate. So around $3 million a year was going to this Creatives in Schools program, and that has all been now moved around the education sector. Without programs like that, I think school life is not only just devoid of what makes it so rich and special, but also the opportunity for growth and opportunity for boosting confidence in many young people's lives is lost. And I think people often sort of misjudge the arts, especially at a secondary level, but I mean, there's studies to show that arts education can, I mean, if you take music, you're more likely to do better in your STEM subjects, things like that. But also on the issue of truancy, which you were talking about for a bit, I just find it a bit rich to expect students to want to come to school when you've defunded what makes school so special. I don't know, I wouldn't want to go to a school where I couldn't act and sing and do things like that. But so that expectation for me was a bit rich. I think, sorry to come back to the point of a wiser future. A wiser future, I don't think exists without arts education. I think it's really integral for all young people. I mean, I think about Jacinda Ardern and her ability to, or all politicians really, to memorize a speech that's just like memorizing lines in drama. They're fundamental skills that get built from primary to secondary school, and they really do make great employees.
Thank you. Great. Thanks very much. Interesting range of views. I've got a power of notes now. Now we'll just spend a few minutes each on the second question, which was what's essential to address the challenges that you've seen. You've sort of partly answered.
I did.
But, so it can just be brief, but we'll start with.
Yeah, look, I did allude to what I think are some of the key challenges. In no particular order, I do think we do have to front up to the fact that our civil society is currently designed has flaws that has created the largest social and physical infrastructure deficit in history, that incentivises exaggerated adversarial behaviour by politicians that drives us crazy and results in frequent policy reversals that waste all of our time, money and energy, that gives rise to non-evidence-based policy formation implemented by siloed government agencies that are more designed to mitigate risk than to implement change, and I could go on and on and on. I repeat, liberal democracy in all its forms and the various designs of the machinery of government, they're just ideas we made up, whānau. And it's incumbent on us, if we want to address the root causes, which I'm saying are the root causes of so much of the ills we see in our society, including the ones that were just alluded to by our young ladies here. So if we actually had a genuine evidence-based policy formation process, then they wouldn't have shut down either of the two things that you alluded to, at least without a sound cost-benefit analysis, and not a narrow cost-benefit analysis, a multifactorial one. So, first thing we've got to do, whānau, is to call it that we need a learning democracy. I'll term it. We need to figure out how to do it better. Second thing I would say is, well, I've alluded to a demographic cliff, Yeah, so I'm not going to say go out and have babies, but with the babies we have, we need to do better with. And I'll end with that. I think the alignment of the interests of labour and capital, there's quite a bit of innovation going on in the world about that. So the living wage is a small and obvious example. For instance, out at Ngāti Toa, we're a living wage organisation, and there but another thing we're trying is to normalise the opportunity for employees of any of our enterprises to be shareholders. We set aside a portion of the equity and make available, shareholding opportunities for employees so that they learn what it means to be an owner of a business, and they become financially literate, and they become stakeholders and aligns incentives. That's hardly woohoo, what a bright idea, but it's an example of getting alignment. Plenty to do on the economic front, but the two things I'd like to finish on is the intergenerational wisdom bit, and it comes back to the having babies bit. One more, need to say first, actually. So none of this makes sense at all if we don't have sufficient homogeneity of societal values, right? The US is on the road to hell, and they started at the top of that hill, and they're getting towards the bottom now because they never had the sufficient wisdom in the various locations where values are created and promulgated and institutionalized and ritualized to stop the journey of polarization that is threatening to tear them apart. Thankfully, we're nowhere near that. Nowhere near that. I would cite our ability to construct Fortress New Zealand, and create the team of 5 million only a couple of years ago as a case in point that there is sufficient homogeneity in what is meaningful and good in this land. Sufficient. It was a game in two halves. The second half was a bit rubbish, but the first half was pretty solid. So, but where I'm going with that, whānau, is we do have to decide what is good, what our preferences are. Is fairness at the top of our tree, or is there something else? That's not a make it happen thing. That's that's literally a choice. That's up to us. And still talking about that. Last thing, babies and intergenerational wisdom transmission. With respect to our young guests, as important, vitally important as the classroom is, and the hall where the acting takes place, the most fundamental place where the creation and transmission of intergenerational wisdom occurs is the home. And indeed, the village that we all are raised in. Well, homes aren't what they used to be, whānau, and villages sure ain't what they used to be. There's a problem. The headlong pursuit of materialistic accomplishment, materialism generally has created isolation, has created children trying to figure it out. The idea of a 16-year-old being in a flat, mouldy or otherwise is a sad reflection. But the idea of villages, both metaphorically and literally, is a thing. That's where. So here's a reflection, here's something for our young guests to consider. So knowledge and data, I've been around a lot of really smart people who I would give a corner dairy to run. Data and ability to recite information isn't actually where wisdom arises. Wisdom, I think, arises out of the experience of applying that knowledge and seeing what happens, what works, what doesn't, and what makes us happy and what doesn't. And one of the great things about belonging to a family and a village is that those prior lessons can be passed on, as you don't have to learn all of it yourself every time. That in fact, trusted voices, trusted faces and trusted places are able to share those same lessons learned 20, 30, 40 years ago, so you don't have to. Now, of course, you still will, but that's the journey of us all, isn't it? So, last thing then from me, and I love this quote, first time I hear it, and I love it till I die. Dame Fiona Cooper, God bless her, said, take care of our children,
take care of what they see, take care of what they hear, take care of what they feel. For how the children grow, so will be the shape of Aotearoa. That's the fair and wise future that lies before us. And I have to say, we're not doing very good about taking care of what our children are feeling, seeing or hearing. So we've got to do better, whānau. Kia ora.
I basically said what I wanted to say to this question. But yeah, make it 16. Countries like Austria, Scotland and Wales, I believe, they've made it 16 already. They are seeing much more consistency. People who start voting younger, they continue to vote. I mean, in this country we have sort of a disproportionately low level of young voters, those sort of younger age groups. So I think to get young people talking and using their voice and continue to use their voice, I think making it 16 is incredibly important. Also, reinstate the Creatives in Schools program, please. I thought it was fantastic. It worked really well for me, and I think it would work really well for a wiser future. That's sort of all I have to say.
So yeah, well, agreed on the Creatives in Schools thing. Prima facie, is that how you say it? It was a really important learning experience, I think, for that entire class. And I think it's really important that there's, outside of the classroom, education opportunities as well, which also obviously comes from funding education more. But in terms of how do we get there to a wiser future, there's a couple of things. There's what I was talking about before with talking to young people. I think framing it as stakeholder engagement is one of the easiest ways to get people to actually listen, because even above a principled level of like, you should listen to everyone in society, you know, even if they aren't engaged civically yet, and, you know, even if they're young and not going to be the most, you know, not going to give you like concrete funding reallocation options, even above a principled level, you are going to get the best educational outcomes if you listen to the people that are in the system. So I would say, if we want to get to a place where New Zealand's educational outcomes are globally competitive and also fair and equitable, you need students to be wiser, education providers and finances as well, Ministry of Education, and private providers as well to be educated on education, teachers, legislators, etc. Because then consequently you have a wiser workforce economy and you have, you know, better well-being generally as a country. So I think that currently we don't use our data, capital or labour effectively in terms of education. I think that there is too much of a focus on I think that there is too much legislative power or decision-making power given to people with governance expertise. I know we're in the government building, and I do value governance. I think it's a very important thing. But I think that giving more autonomy to teachers and students is something really important to think about. And I would note charter schools here, not that I am in support of charter schools, because I do think that the way that they were done in the past and the way that they are being proposed now is flawed and will likely waste money that could be going into the public system. The principle behind charter schools is what I agree with, is that the person who knows best what a child needs is their teacher or themselves and their parents. I think that we need to account for the child's attitude towards school when we're talking about like policy changes that we're making, and because if they don't want to engage, they're not going to engage. Like, I'm sure there are parents in the room, we love to complain. Teenagers and children love to complain. that's not going to change regardless of how many workbooks you have in school. So we need to, I think, change children's attitudes around school, and that comes with real engagement with young people and making sure that we are taking those attitudes into consideration. And then following on from that, in order to do that properly, I think that we lack retrospect in a broader sense, not just in education, with legislation, like what Helmut was saying about, reversing policy changes and constantly being in the cycle of one government to the next. Something changes, it goes back the other way. I think it is A, so exhausting, but B, it is such a waste of resources. It is really frustrating to see the country go back and forth on things like this. And I think that if we used our data effectively and we actually did have retrospect in policy making, that we had an evidence-based assessment system for policies, that we wouldn't end up like this. So if I can note the 2014 charter schools experiment here, that experiment wasted, I say wasted, I mean, it spent about $50,000 per student in charter schools, just to experiment with if they worked or not, right? And that's fine. Experimentation is good for policy making. I think that it's great to make sure we know $48,421 per student, which is 6 times the amount of public funding that we currently have. And we're trying again. I'm not sure why. I think that there's pretty clear evidence to suggest that maybe that funding would be better spent improving the education system that's available to everyone, and that everyone is currently in, and that we're dealing with the outcomes of. And so I think that we get lost behind this idea of, oh yes, we want to improve teacher autonomy, ergo, like, here you go, charter schools. Rather than, pay teachers more, make it a more attractive job, have better teachers, make school better. I feel like it's a pretty clear chain of logic. And I think that we kind of miss the obvious things a lot. One way I think that we would very easily get to a wiser future is the best education system in the world is Finland, right? The reason that teachers are paid more there isn't just because, they ask for it and then whoop-de-doo. It's because the attitude towards teaching as a career is very, very different. It's a very esteemed career. It's very difficult to get into, and obviously that change took a long time, and I'm not saying that we should make teaching harder to get into now, but teachers are very, very respected in Finland, and almost as respected as doctors, because it's recognized there that it is one of the most important jobs in society. And I think that New Zealand lacks that a lot. My teachers have been as important as my parents in bringing me up. It is so important that we pay teachers a wage, a salary that reflects their work and their stamina as well, because we talk so much about brain drain and people moving to Australia and etc. And oh, it's such a shame. Oh, whatever are we going to do, right? But one of the biggest sectors where we lack labour is teaching, and there is such an easy way to fix that, which is just pay them more and make it a more attractive career, because no one with higher education in mathematics is going to go into a teaching career in mathematics if their cap salary is $100,000, because it's just not realistic to invest in a higher education and then go into high school teaching, even though we need good maths teachers with mathematics backgrounds, and and there's a really clear way to do that. So I think that we kind of have missed that step in the equation, and it would be really good to go back and fix it. But sorry, how long do we have? Rambling a bit. Okay. Finally, I do think that we have to be mindful of young people in decision making and societal development, economic development. Of course, I've said that already, but I worked with a lot of junior students this year on there's these new exams called the co-requisites in year 11, and there's been a lot of fuss about them, and our school's very lucky, we had very good outcomes with them. But I sat down with them all, I was tutoring, or I was running a workshop or something, and they all had very strong opinions about the testing system, and, very important opinions, and things that the ministry should probably be hearing. And I think that if there's one takeaway you have from this, it's go into a school, sit down with a child, and ask them to complain. And you will hear a lot of very enlightening things and a lot of very good advice for legislators. So.
Well, thank you all. We've got lots of food for thought here. I'm not sure I can even summarise effectively before we open it up for some questions. I suppose it does all boil down to how we organise maybe not just a learning democracy, but a learning society, and allow voices within that. Yeah. So anyway, I'll open it up for questions from the floor. I have a question or an observation or.
Thank you for your presentation. I think for a wiser future, everything begins with family. Like the early childhood development is important. The primary care from the parents, the guardian in raising the child, giving the child good food, good environment, send the child to school to study and to learn. Education leads to employment. And when a job creation in the country, we are paying taxes to the government, and where this money goes into public funding for better hospital, better education, better transport, better everything. So in this way, support wiser future. This is my opinion. Thank you.
Thanks very
Can I
much.
make an observation about that? So, in the not too, I'm not sure if it's still the case, but it was in the not too far distant past. There's 7 workers for every retired person. Before 2050, if my memory serves me right, there'll be 2 workers for every retired person. So who's paying for what, whānau? This is a reality. That's the demographic cliff I was referring to. Now, all of us grey-haired, no-hairs who are going to be in that superannuitant community, worked our lives listening to the mantra of pay-as-you-go superannuation and health. And I saw an analysis the other day by Shimabio Yaakov that says that within, I think it's 20 years, 100% of our tax take will be spent just on superannuation and health, 100%. So there's nothing left for anything else. These are very real issues, whānau, nowhere to go with it. We're the only ones that can pay. So we have to think very clearly about how it is we are going to generate the economic wealth and the question of enough, and we may need to revisit some of the assumptions about what's fair and have less reliance on some of the things we can't rely on. Rock in a hard place, whānau, just saying, kia ora.
I'd like to question this. And I'd like to start by asking our 2 students from Wellington Girls College. I had the pleasure of teaching economics there, by the way, for 2 years, and I just loved the place. But why is it that the fact that people are getting old is regarded as a cost? There's a new concept called liquid aging. And it starts with the idea that used to be that, I can remember when I thought 30 was old. Probably you 2 think 30 is old. And then it was 64 that was old. And I think even some of the Beatles would agree that 64, when they got there, it wasn't quite as old as they thought it was. there's a role that, going back to the family and the wise ideas, and going back to the way I believe Maori organised themselves prior to colonisation, we worked on the concept of families having a role throughout their lifetime and having importance and significance. And I think if we started thinking about aging in a different way in New Zealand, just for a start, if you want more babies, I think we need grandparents. And valuing, as well as the role of teachers, valuing the wisdom and the role of grandparents would be a good start. We need more caregivers, and valuing that role would also be a start. Finally, I think a lot of us still have, even with our grey hair, still have a lot of brains, and we can still make a commitment to work. So just like comments from the three of you on that topic, on that approach to aging.
Any responses?
It's a good thought. Thank you. It's something I've been thinking about a lot recently, actually, because, well, the aging population in rather than 30 being old, I don't think 30 is old, just to be clear, because I've been trying to choose a degree to study at university, and it does get you thinking, what career is going to be sustainable for me into the future, as there are fewer and fewer people that come that come to the workforce as graduates, and as the birth rate declines, right? Because I'm trying to think about, okay, actually, this workforce is going to get older and older. How am I going to enter it? What is going to be best? And obviously, that topic includes at what age. What age is too old to be working anymore, or how should we define the age of retirement and stuff like that. And I think it's interesting that you mentioned teachers, because one of the most important things about being a teacher is that you have lived experience to pass on to your students, and it's like what Helmut was saying about passing on intergenerational information and sort of stories and wisdom. Is, I think if we valued roles that are, roles like teachers more and like caregivers, that we would move away from the idea that that aging makes your productivity decline or your ability to work decline, because there are obviously roles where aging makes you physically unable to do your work, or makes you, too tired to attend the whole day of work that you're required to do, right? But if we moved away, I think, from such a heavy emphasis on a corporate lifestyle, or a sort of like 9 to 5 sort of desk job centered economy, or centered sort of societal focus, then I think we would see a shift in attitudes towards aging. And even with digitalization, right? The jobs that are least likely to be more efficiently done by AI are those that can be done by any age. It's teaching, it's caregiving, it's nursing, etc. And so I think that's something really interesting to think about.
Yeah, sure.
Lee. Should we?
Okay, so I definitely got something to say about that. So it's an unavoidable fact that there's a high correlation with our age with cost on health. That just happens, especially as it gets exponential the closer you get to 80, and then
the last 2 years of life.
Well, that's where it accrues most concentrated. But that's just a fact. There's nothing to wring your hands about. That just is. It's a biological reality. So so that's a cost, right? The second observation, I guess, is a more important one. The allusion that you made there, thank you, to the non-economic frame on value, really. Even if you stick with an economic frame, the invisibility of the contribution that is made, and not taken into the calculation of GDP of all of the unpaid,
work and so forth. Even moving away from the economic frame, that the value that accrues to us individually and collectively of the roles that we play as we move through our life cycle. Increasingly in Western society, those have been minimised, if not negated to a large extent, and that's a gap, that's a mistake. And so I agree with you that, in fact, in traditional Indigenous communities, the retention and value of the roles of our kaumātua and so forth is something to renew. Blesses the lives of everybody in that circle. And the last observation I just make is that, I'm slow to, champion the idea of having to continue to work, till you drop. Thank you very much. In China, because of their demographic cliff, they are increasingly relying on people beyond the normal age of to keep, their nose at the right wheel. Now, if people are healthy and willing and stimulated with their professional endeavours, go hard. All the power to you. But again, the truth of the matter is that won't be everybody's reality for a range of reasons, and we still are facing a workforce crunch. So anyway, that's a potted reflection on the range of issues you alluded to. Yeah.
Of course, you're absolutely right that people start using more medications and interventions as they age. However, the most expensive part is the last 2 years of life. And the second most expensive time in our health system is residential care. So if we could do more of that at home and continue to value caregivers, we could save money there. And thirdly, the other most expensive healthcare cost is having children, is that maternity care. This is my own study with the assistance of Len Cook at Stats New Zealand. But what the real answer I wanted to give to your question is, I totally agree with your point that someone who is going to work for 8 to 10 hours a day building a house reaches a point where that is no longer physically possible. However, if they continue to become a handyman or something, which is physically possible, they get the health and well-being of the human connections, which means they're less likely to need medical intervention. They're less likely to end up in residential care, and our costs don't grow.
It'll happen.
And thank goodness it will happen. The challenges at the moment is that the intellectuals, the wise people, are all saying, you and Jean-Mobile and Dominic Stevens are all saying we've got this frightening aging cliff coming up. And I think the wise thing needs to be saying, we're human beings, how can we make the most of all of our people? And I think that's what you're saying.
Yeah, that's fair.
So we've got Len and then Brigitte, the last two. Time's run away with us.
It does.
Can I just comment on Helmut's generational thing? The generation of men and women that went through the Depression and the Second World War created the society that we lived in the 50s, 60s, 70s. They created the welfare state, built the dams, ran families that actually they devoted their lives to having. My generation, which was one of their children, really we did nothing at all of that substance. And nor can I say yours. And I think what we're relying on now is this generation that has got facing up pressures of environment, of probably the first generation that's going to generally be poorer than its predecessors. And so in a way, they may be the first generations. Can I just a couple of bits on babies? Just after I was born, we had about 60,000 babies a year and a 2 million population. In 20 years' time, 30 years' time, we'll still have, according to that government statistician who I hope to trust, we still have 60,000 babies a year, but 6 million population. So each baby now, the opportunity cost of failing to develop and give it a good chance is much higher. I could have fallen off the way, and it wouldn't have made a hell of a lot of difference to the world. But it makes a lot of difference now. I think, however, come back to Suzanne's point, 45% of population growth in the next 20 years is people 75 and over. And really we have to come back to some basics. For example, why do we have a retirement age? Partly because the New Deal in the 1930s in the United States, Roosevelt wanted to create jobs for young people, so we decided people should retire at 60. And we have to realise that the retirement age is a fiction, is a figment of policy. Like Suzanne and I, we were born, shall I say, quite a long time ago, and we still muddle around. We're doing and still able to be a nuisance. We have the highest, apart from the US, working age, the number of share of population, 65, 75, in the workforce. And it seems to me, as our health improves, we could be totally rethinking our nature of retirement and retirement provision without going back to a demeaning, means-tested regime for retired people. If we educate the generation that's there more consistently and coherent, their productivity will be better. And can I ask them one question? You go to an elite school, really. What are you doing to think about the quality of education across other schools? My final comment is I was talking to a maths professor once, and he said, you know, if you're at a top decile school, every science lesson is taught by a science graduate. If you're at a bottom decile school, you're bloody lucky to have half the lessons taught by a science graduate. What are we doing to provide those sort of opportunities, and even more, what are we doing to discover that? Just a cheeky comment.
We'll move to Brigitte because we're a bit tight for time. So
I agree with you absolutely about our school. I feel very lucky to be at the school that I'm at. I've received such a fantastic education. I think in part it's difficult for us to stand up to the decile system, but I mean in a small way we were also at our protest at Parliament. It sort of stood as a standing up for all of the schools across the country, regardless of decile, who have had terrible issues with property as well. So things like that. That's not exactly education, but just standing up for those schools as well. Because, I mean, regardless of decile, we were in a similar situation. But I don't know.
No, generally I agree with Millie. I think it is hard when you are a student yourself to really get anyone to listen to you, but thank you for coming today. But I do care deeply about the equity of the education system in this country, and I do wish there were more ways for me to connect with the realities of other New Zealand young people that don't have the opportunities that I do. And I try my best to, within my own school, make sure that we bring up those who, I do a lot of work with kids with learning disabilities, and our peer tutoring system is free. So we are trying to create equity in our own school, and hopefully by the time I'm older and I can vote and etc., we all will be able to do that work to make sure that there's more equity in the system.
So final comment, Brigitte.
Oops, I hope I get it right. I really like that overarching vision of yours, Helmut, about the learning democracy, because I think if we don't put that into action, we're going to have real problems, especially with the distribution of our population, because the old people will also decide about our future. Because if we have that distribution, it's going to be extremely difficult for young people to have their say. And so I think, should there even be an age where we should not be allowed to vote anymore? That's of course devil's advocate. But on the other hand, being devil's advocate, if we don't have a learning democracy and a really sound education system, we will look at things that happened in Austria and in East Germany at the last European election, where the 16 to 19-year-old voted fascist 55%. So this is the future we were looking toward if we don't have a sound democracy in the learning system. So I think we have some really enormous challenges. I wish I could say something more upbeat, but I can't think of anything right now.
Nice.
Okay, I've allowed us to run a little over time. It's just been such a fascinating discussion. So I just want to take the opportunity to thank everyone for coming to this morning and to the other 2 sessions in the series. And a big, big thank you to Helmut, to Millie and to Teresa for a really stimulating discussion this morning. Let's show them. We have recorded these 3 breakfast sessions, and we will make them available to you. And I'll probably also, in the email when we send the link out, I'll also ask you if there are any topics that you'd like to see in a Dean Series breakfast session next year. Always open to suggestions. I think there's a few possibilities coming out of the discussions that we've been having here. And I wanted to do a plug on behalf of Brigitte Bernisch-Brecker, who is the director of the Stout Research Centre for New Zealand Studies. They have a conference on the 21st to the 23rd of November this year on poverty by design, addressing systemic causes of poverty and options for change in New Zealand. And Helmut, I think your organisation is one of the sponsors of
Yes,
of that
look, I'm
conference.
going to be swanning off to Vietnam for my 40th anniversary, so apologies for missing that. I really am disappointed to miss that.
But so we have some flyers for that conference, which will be outside if anyone's interested.
Yeah, just saying everyone is invited to register. It's not just for academics.
So thank you very much, everyone.